I now invite all the speakers and the moderator on the dais. They're setting up. Ma'am, please.
I thank you, Shiv Kumarji, for the wonderful presentation. And I think caves being the utmost and the initial structures of archaeological, historical evidence, I think ground level conservation works are extremely tedious because this is where cultural and natural heritage go hand in hand. And at the same time, we have to conserve, restore, preserve both the heritage because it is something, first human activity happened in the natural terrain or the era. So it was a wonderful insight. The overall works that ASI has been carrying out, it is excellent, and I thank you again. Now I invite all the speakers of this session to please come on the dais. And I request you all to please be ready with your questions if you have any. And, we will take this one by one. Yeah, Dr. Shikha Jain, please. Shiv Kumarji, I also request Dr. Tejas Garge to please be on dais. Thank you. Okay. So anyone, it was such wonderful presentations today. Does anyone have any questions particularly about the World Heritage, conservation, cave conservation? Yes, Vaidehi, can someone please take the mic?
I have a question for Vikas, sir. We have been looking at your work since last almost 15 years. It's a wonderful work, and the way you presented as well, so methodic and keeping the integrity, authenticity, everything so intact. I had a question regarding urban landscape projects which you worked on. Apart from the conservation of material and structure, what was the major challenge you faced during the implementation of project, like from community point of view or from a legal point of view, or what was it?
Well, I've not really understood what specific do you, because being very frank, the community part, I'm not really interacting. So I should be upfront and saying that in the buildings which you restored, maximum you're dealing with tenants and owners. And as it goes, the tenants don't want to spend any money. So we have to work out a module in which it can generate, where there's a win-win situation. So as there are two approaches, a lot of people demolish the entire slab and they recast the slab. So it's an expensive proposition. It goes longer and durable. But for that, you'll have to rehab the people. You have to move them out. So as I said to you, in the case of commissariat building, only we had identified areas where the jack arches were in very dilapidated condition. So we had to locally deal with them and ask them to temporarily shift. So as I said to you, the economical approach also helps from a conservation point of view of retaining the authenticity.
And in terms of when we think about Mumbai, the constraint of land and dealing with the open spaces, and coming up with a proposal Flora Fountain as well. It's a beautiful work. So what was it that really challenged you there as well to deal with the people around and even the authorities? How was it? The negotiation part, how it was?
So the Flora Fountain was a larger part of the scheme. The idea was to completely pedestrianize and corbel the area going up to Asiatic Library. So the idea is that you already have a road which is not a thoroughfare, the Veer Nariman Road, and you have the area where at the moment the metro people have done their parking and other things. So the idea is on a Saturday, Sunday, the city gets a plaza back when the traffic is not there and when the vehicles are not there. So that was a larger plan of it, but since the metro came in, the whole thing changed, and it could not continue further. But the idea is that if you consider these places to be tourist destinations and other things, you do require such kind of public spaces, plazas, or people where you can sit and you can this thing. So this is how it should have been planned. Our problem is when we tend to overdo things. Like we tend to put more lights than what is really required, and then all fancy period type of lightings, different color lightings and other things. So that ambience and that charm of that space goes away. So less should be more kind of a thing if we can work it out.
Thank you so much, sir.
I have a question about the cave conservation, especially at Ajanta. There has been, like many scholars such as Dr. Walter Spink or others have suggested, there have been some historical destruction which is like from 5th century or so. So sometimes it happens that in conservation, the entire thing is restored. So in that endeavor, the actual historical information is lost in many cases. And also, some scholars have proposed an intrusive sculpture phase in Ajanta. So there is a lack of symmetry and many such aspects which are actually very useful for art historians like us to analyze and date various aspects of cave excavations and so on. And many of these things have changed, being changed in conservation, even the window typologies or door frames and so on. So, and because it's a central archaeology monument, one actually believes and trusts them to kind of retain the heritage structures and archaeology in the best possible format, so that it's not just, the information, crucial information is not lost, the integrity of the monument is not lost. So I would like to know superintending archaeologists' remarks on these sort of endeavors that have happened in Ajanta. I mean, if we want to give out information about the typologies, there might be interpretation centers, which is an area where you can kind of demonstrate it rather than actually making changes in the original cave, which are so sensitive and so on. So I would like to hear his thoughts on the same thing.
मैडम, जो ASI का जो कंजर्वेशन पॉलिसी है, अभी न्यू पॉलिसी है या पहले से भी, हमारा यही होता है कि जब तक ज़रूरत ना हो, जब तक रिक्वायरमेंट नहीं हो, तब तक हम कोई इंटरवेंट नहीं करते हैं साइट पे। और जो आपने पढ़ा या जिसके बारे में आपको जानकारी है, क्या हुआ कि हमारे ASI के हैंडओवर होने से पूर्व भी कई तरह के कंजर्वेशन के वर्क अजंता में किए गए हैं, लेकिन आज के तारीख में मैं एश्योर करता हूँ कि जब तक कोई ज़रूरत नहीं होती, कोई इस तरह का जो हाइपोथेटिकल कंजर्वेशन तो हम नहीं करते हैं, करते ही नहीं हैं। और जो फसाड वगैरह का जहाँ भी कंजर्वेशन किया गया है, वो आप एक तरह से समझ लीजिए कि जो बहुत ही रिक्वायर्ड थे साइट के लिए तभी किया गया है, अदरवाइज़ हम चीज़ों को नहीं छेड़ते हैं, उसकी ओरिजिनल ऑथेंटिसिटी को हम बरकरार रखते हैं, और यही ASI की पहचान भी है। हम उसी पॉलिसी पे काम करते हैं। थैंक यू।
I think we need to understand that conservation is also evolving based, right? It does not have its own understanding right from the first day, and as you specifically mentioned Walter Spink, so I think there's a strong requirement of dialogue between art historians, architects and ASI officials, and so far there was no common platform for that. And through this conference, that is what we are trying to create. And you have to imagine 60s and 70s when all the RCC works were carried out by taking out all the Nizam stone pillars. I don't think there was any dialogue of that sort, and it was a purely engineering point of view driven solutions, even which were heavily criticized and questioned by UNESCO. But so there is some collateral damage in the process. One has to accept that. But now there is this sensitivity, and principle of minimum intervention has been accepted. So I wish this dialogue, not criticism, and vice versa, but dialogue is the requirement of the day. And for me, even this small session was a bit of a journey in time of my own posting in Aurangabad Circle. And even chronologically, we started with Maratha forts, jumped into colonial buildings. So 19th century, then 18th, 16th century, 14th century, then again 7th, 8th century, and we went back to 2nd century BC. So it's quite a long span of time and variety of building that we covered under this particular session. Idea was to discuss the conservation related matter to the World Heritage and urban spaces.
Thank you very much for this question. I think, recently we have like conservation architects empanelment. Maybe the department can think about art historians or sculptors, or even, people who are related to cultural heritage can also be a part of the team, where even geologists or environmentalists can be empaneled, which are thoroughly scrutinized by the department maybe. So these people can be on board where, nature and culture, history goes hand in hand. So this could be one of the proposal that, we would like to say. Thank you for the question. And I think, this with the conservation of caves, which comes so important, I think preventive conservation is also something that ASI is taking up, which is one of the excellent initiative, because we hardly think about anything preventive. And that is something very important. So thank you for this. Any other question, please? Yeah.
Hello, sir. My question is to Vikas, sir. As you mentioned that the major obstacle in any project is the funding. So what are the challenges, like how have you handled the issue of funding in any project? And are there any, if there are any landmark projects, so obviously we have an option of CSR or other things. But then if it is a property which is not even listed, but the client is very interested in restoring his property, what are the options available for funding for different kind of and different level hierarchy of heritage monuments? Not just in Mumbai, in maybe throughout the country.
Well, I don't know what you're asking in clarity.
The funding options, sir.
Yeah, funding, see, the idea itself, you have to understand who's the ownership, who are the users, and then there's a clarity which will fall. You get one-time grants, the building gets maintained, but it again falls back into the same square one situation after 4 years, after the things have been pulled out. So we are not talking of sustainability. So the rent control is the biggest kind of an enemy for, I'm talking of lived-in heritage kind of a thing, because till the time you have the classic examples was Army Navy building, where Indian Airlines was paying, ₹1 a rent for the whole ground floor which they were occupying. But when they moved out, and when the owners started getting ₹100 a square feet, they plowed the money back to the building. Same with the Esplanade Mansion, which I mentioned. So we need to see, and this is where all our Indian cities, we restore landmarks, but our grain is the one which is deteriorating. Once you maintain them well, and if you reintroduce rental housing again, that will instantly solve all your problems, because then these buildings will not undergo redevelopment. Now, fortunately, the fort area was really protected, but now you're seeing, things are changing in that area, and that's really going to make a lot of difference. At one time, we are getting World Heritage Site status, but at the same time, things are being pulled down. So this is where, the idea is that that's where the government also has to come proactive on encouraging repairs rather than redevelopment as what it is doing now.
Yes, any other questions? Can you pull the mic there?
My question is to sir शिव भगत सर. केव आर्किटेक्चर और औरंगाबाद केव आर्किटेक्चर से थोड़ा अलग क्वेश्चन पूछ रहा हूँ. औरंगाबाद ऐसी सिटी है जो बहुत क्राउडेड है, रिच हेरिटेज है, कल्चर है. वहाँ पे बहुत बार पब्लिक अथॉरिटी और लोकल रिप्रेजेंटेटिव इनका बहुत टसल होता है. बीच में मुझे एक 3 या 3.5 साल पहले की बात याद आ रही है. जब मैं औरंगाबाद में था तब एक बारव थी वहाँ पे, और वो बारव में 1-2 लड़के बाय एक्सीडेंटली गिर चुके थे. सो वहाँ के कुछ जो लोकल रिप्रेजेंटेटिव थे वो डायरेक्टली बारव को ख़त्म ही कर दिया जाए, तो इनके ऊपर ये झगड़ा चालू था. सो आई एम जस्ट आस्किंग, औरंगाबाद में हर जगह कहाँ पे खोदते हुए कंस्ट्रक्शन करते हुए जो पुरानी नहर सिस्टम है वो नहर सिस्टम पाई जाती है, और मकई गेट की जो वेल फोर्टिफाइड डिफेंस है वो सब जितने भी एग्जिस्टिंग दरवाजे हैं उनमें से सबसे अच्छा या आई थिंक सबसे बड़ा स्ट्रांगली फोर्टिफाइड है. सो उसके बारे में, क्योंकि एट द एंड पॉइंट ऑफ दैट फोर्टिफिकेशन एनक्रोचमेंट हो चुका है एंड दैट स्टिल गोइंग ऑन. सो ASI जो बार बार मिलती है नहर के ट्रेसेस उसके बारे में, और जो कुछ मकई गेट की जो फोर्टिफिकेशन वॉल है जो खाम नदी के बिल्कुल बिसाइड है. सो ASI उसके कंजर्वेशन और प्लानिंग के बारे में क्या सोच रहा है इन फ्यूचर एंड इन प्रेजेंट ऑल्सो?
देखिए, ये एक ऐसा क्वेश्चन है, कोई भी हेरिटेज स्ट्रक्चर हो, यहाँ पे जितने लोग बैठे हैं एक ही कॉमन बात है, यहाँ पे जो लोग भी बैठे हैं उनमें कि दे आर हेरिटेज लवर्स. ये कॉमन बात है हम सब यहाँ जो भी बैठे हैं. और वो मोनूमेंट आइदर इट इज़ ए प्रोटेक्टेड मोनूमेंट अंडर ASI और अंडर स्टेट गवर्नमेंट, और मे बी अनप्रोटेक्टेड मोनूमेंट. हम कहीं रास्ते से भी गुजरते हैं और कोई अनप्रोटेक्टेड मोनूमेंट हमको बहुत ही डिलापिडेटेड कंडीशन में दिखती है तो हमको तकलीफ होती है, क्योंकि हमारा एक इमोशनल अटैचमेंट होता है मोनूमेंट के साथ. और जितनी तकलीफ आपको होती है उतनी ही तकलीफ हमको भी होती है. मैं भी खाम रिवर के किनारे वो जो फोर्ट है, जब पहला दिन जब मैं औरंगाबाद आया तो उसकी स्थिति देख के मुझे भी अच्छा नहीं लगा. तो ये तो हम सभी लोग चाहते हैं कि भाई इस तरह के जो भी डिलापिडेटेड कंडीशन में हमारे मोनूमेंट हैं उनका संरक्षण होना चाहिए, उसको बचाया जाना चाहिए. और ASI जो है हमारी जो सेंट्रली प्रोटेक्टेड मोनूमेंट है उनमें हम काम करते ही हैं. हमारा एक हेड भी होता है अनप्रोटेक्टेड मोनूमेंट का, जिसमें हम कुछ सिलेक्टेड मोनूमेंट को लेके काम करते हैं. तो तकलीफ हमें भी उतनी होती है, और इसमें सबसे बड़ा जो रोल है वो पब्लिक अवेयरनेस का है. तो पब्लिक अवेयरनेस के लिए भी हम कार्यक्रम करते हैं. पब्लिक अवेयरनेस आकर ही हम ऐसे चीज़ों को बचा सकते हैं. और औरंगाबाद सिटी या बीजापुर को भी मैंने देखा है, ये ऐसे सिटी हैं जहाँ पे आप जहाँ भी खुदाई करेंगे वहाँ पे एक आर्कियोलॉजिकल रिवंस निकल आएगा. बीजापुर का वही है, औरंगाबाद का, और ऐसे कई सारे सिटी हैं जो मेरी जानकारी में नहीं है. तो उसका तो यही है कि हम ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा पब्लिक अवेयरनेस करें और वहाँ के जो लोकल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन है उनको हेरिटेज के प्रति सेंसिटिव बनाएं उनको इस तरह के कार्यक्रमों के द्वारा, ताकि हमको अभी वहाँ पे काम भी हो रहा था, जो आपका मकई दरवाज़ा है वहाँ पे, तो मुझे भी ख़राब लगा. वो पाइपलाइन डाल रहे हैं और 50 तरह के डेवलपमेंट के काम कर रहे हैं, जो किसी भी हेरिटेज लवर को देखने के बाद काम को आपको बुरा लगेगा कि आप एक अपने हेरिटेज का विध्वंस करके नया डेवलपमेंट का काम कर रहे हैं. तो ऐसा काफ़ी सारा हो रहा है. इसमें यही उपाय होता है कि हम हेरिटेज के प्रति लोगों में जागरूकता लाएं, तभी हम इस तरह के विनाश को रोक सकते हैं. ऐसे आपके लिए एक अच्छी बात मैं बता सकता हूँ कि जो थट्टे नहर है, जो वहाँ औरंगाबाद में जितने सारे नहर थे, अंडरग्राउंड चैनल थे जो उस समय के, उसमें से थट्टे नहर का कंजर्वेशन का काम अभी ASI कर रही है अंडर अनप्रोटेक्टेड मोनूमेंट स्कीम, जो हमारे प्रोटेक्टेड एरिया में नहीं है, फिर भी हम उसके कंजर्वेशन के लिए काम कर रहे हैं. कभी आगे हम मिलेंगे तो हम आपको दिखाएंगे कि हमने क्या किया. थैंक यू.
Thank you, sir. I think I'll take one question on World Heritage now. So I have a question where, World Heritage is such a title which has rescued, cultural heritage, human values, and even the heritage itself. But the management becomes something very important. We consider monitoring as a part of management, but is there any monitoring over the management itself? So that is something I want to ask Dr. Jain, that specifically in the context of Maharashtra and the forts which are actually durgam, which are difficult to access, specifically in terms of Maratha military forts. So do you have any views on it?
I would say World Heritage inscription, it's like a tool. I mean, conservation professionals like myself, we just use it as a tool for protection. So we feel that if it gets, if it's worth a global value and it gets that tag, then, the government, whether it's state government or central government, has a commitment to protect it more. There are, of course, ASI has more funds for World Heritage sites, same for state government. There are other organizations that come forth. So it's just a higher visibility, and that higher visibility itself leads to, I would say, a sort of monitoring. Monitoring by the World Heritage Committee, of course, is there because it gets discussed every 5 years in the World Heritage Committee. The state of conservation reports are submitted every 5 years, or if it is required, every 2 years. So that level of monitoring is there. But also otherwise, because people are more aware of that as a World Heritage Site, a lot of times NGOs or local activists, they just write straight to World Heritage Center Paris saying, this is an issue, like the Humpy Bridge happened or other things. So any incident they write to, and the World Heritage Center responds immediately asking, ASI, what is happening here? So that monitoring mechanism definitely is an additional, benefit that is there. I actually had a question both for Vikas and for Shiv Bhagat ji, because I was looking at all the restoration, works that have been going on, and despite the fact that, we think, okay, no concrete, only limestone and traditional, but I saw that in both the cases, for certain reasons, concrete is required at times. So I wanted to ask, because when we are using concrete, I mean, for me, the first question is whether we can avoid the concrete and maybe just use steel. So that is a point I wanted to ask, that what, both each of you, in your conservation work, would you look at that? And if possible, if even Dr. Arun Menon can give his viewpoint on that, that whether it, where concrete versus steel would at certain times, depending on the strength, etc., would steel be more preferable, it's more reversible and less intervening?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the case was that in that particular case, the top clock tower, it was made up of very fragile stone, which would have collapsed. So to save it, this was the only option. And if you do completely in steel, that was not possible because each stone had to be doweled. So a mesh was made of 4.5 inches, like a pardi wall, and it was anchored. So it was depending, and it was a lot of merits and demerits discussed with the structural engineer before the conclusion was arrived at. So the most important thing is you have to use materials discreetly if it is saving and helping in saving the life of the fabric. The other option is to reconstruct it, which was available by numbering it, or to redo it. But as I said to you, the original construction was poor because it was just made. It was no locking system, no large stones were used. So there was a fault in its original construction, and with the result of the vegetation growth, this is what it happens. So it has to be case specific, not that you blanketly use. But having said this, sometimes what happens is when you're doing works in foundations and in kind of a thing, like a foundation is to be done of any wall or something. If you're using concrete there, I don't think it's very detrimental. You don't get good quality lime. Lime is not an IS product. And if you can get good quality lime, which is an IS product, then yes, we can talk on the same language. Many times lime is just used by contractors to justify their work. But if you don't have good lime, chuna laga ke gaya.
जी, जो कंक्रीट का मामला हमारा अभी केव कंजर्वेशन में ही है, अदरवाइज नॉर्मली हम अवॉइड करते हैं, ऐसे ही अवॉइड करती है लाइम। यदि मेडिवल पीरियड का जो भी मोटार जिस तरह से जो यूज हुआ है पहले से, हम उसका एनालिसिस करके जो फिर उसी तरह के मोटार प्रिपेयर करके ही कंजर्वेशन का काम करते हैं। कंक्रीट का इस्तेमाल या तो जो अमेनिटीज़ है प्रोवाइड करना है, वहाँ पे करते हैं, या फिर जो अभी आपको एक दो एग्जांपल्स दिखे केव आर्किटेक्चर में, चूँकि वो इस तरह की कैविटी मतलब पर्टिकुलर सिचुएशन में इस तरह का हमने कंक्रीट का इस्तेमाल किया, क्योंकि इतनी बड़ी कैविटी थी कि हम सिर्फ प्लास्टर या रबल इस्तेमाल करते तो उसका लोड ज़्यादा हो जाता। तो हमने उस कैविटी को छोड़ के सिर्फ उसको एक स्क्रीनिंग क्रिएट किया और उसके लिए हमने आरसीसी का इस्तेमाल किया, क्योंकि उसका वेट देने के लिए भी हमको वहाँ पे एक लिंटल की ज़रूरत थी। और जब हम फसाड वगैरह का कंजर्वेशन कर रहे होते हैं तो उस समय हमको वहाँ का जो ओरिजिनल फैब्रिक है, जो भी हम काम कर रहे हैं, उससे मैच करना भी उतना ही अनिवार्य होता है उसको, ताकि जो हम लोगों के सामने रख रहे हैं वो आपको अल्टर्ड नहीं लगे किसी भी तरह से। तो इसलिए हमने वहाँ पे मतलब आपको मैं ये कह सकता हूँ कि बहुत ही अनिवार्य कंडीशन में ही हमने आरसीसी का इस्तेमाल किया। स्टील का विकल्प अच्छा हो सकता है, बट मैं चाहूँगा कि इस पे मेनन साहब कुछ बोलें।
I would love to call you on stage, please. Yeah.
This is a topic that is dear to me, so please stop me if it's going too long. The world is divided into two halves. One half that loves concrete and the other half that doesn't love concrete. But coming to this context, concrete per se, reinforced concrete. I mean, concrete is not the issue, it's the reinforced concrete which is problematic at times. The primary advantage, and I see the reason why the utilization of concrete in the caves, also extensively utilized by the French in Angkor Wat conservation, was primarily because of the free form that concrete can take. And in the caves, that's really the advantage that you have. And by using coarse aggregate and fine aggregate that is similar to the original stone, you can camouflage it to a large extent. So that's where the advantage comes from. Whereas in other constructions, you can actually design a load-bearing member in an efficient manner. Of course, in those conditions where it's more regular in geometry, steel versus concrete could be an option that is worked out, and what's more appropriate aesthetically also can come into the picture. But I would like to bring the focus onto one aspect, which is concrete, if executed well, with proper quality control measures in place, should not give us any concern for its longevity. Because as long as corrosion can be curtailed, we shouldn't worry about concrete deteriorating. Today we know at least 100, 150 years. Reinforced concrete has been in use for about 150 years now. So therefore, what is the quality control on the raw materials that are being used? What are the protocols at the site? You can design reinforced concrete, you can design for corrosion protection, so that needs to come into the picture. And then in very sensitive cases where we're looking at very important monuments where reinforced concrete is being used, cathodic protection is also an option. And one thing that has actually been done at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, where the sunshades have been replaced, the sandstone original design of the sunshades as per Latin's design is sandstone sunshades, 2 meters cantilever, which when they were being executed were not in sandstone but in reinforced lime concrete. Now, reinforced lime concrete in 80 years started showing serious problems of corrosion, with almost 70 to 80% of the sunshades showing spalling. Today, most of that has been replaced with reinforced concrete, but reusing the steel that originally was used, but putting in place cathodic protection, because these are large cantilevers and are going to be exposed to the elements. But today we have a system in place which will notify us on the extent of corrosion, if any, and take corrective measures over time. So I think contextually we could look at the use of concrete where indispensable, but with quality control and monitoring in place. But where we don't think quality control and monitoring is going to be possible, alternatives can be worked out. So I think there's a way forward in this context. Thank you.
Thank you for specifically giving an example, because I think this is always to debate. And I think specifically in the case of caves, what are we trying to do is basically stop the water from percolating in the, in the natural rock. So that is something very important to notice and to note, because cave is something where we do not want water percolation. Otherwise, we use lime in the floors, in the walls, whether we want surface to breathe. But here the surface runoff is more practical than, than the water percolation itself. So thank you for this question. Any other questions? Yeah. Back there, 3 questions.
Hello, hi. My question is to Shikha ma'am. It's about the process of selection of forts. So when you explain the timeline, are we looking into parameters where we are taking into consideration the historical timeline, strategic location, and architectural components of the fort? Or is there any example where the team struggled, where you see some architectural components are higher in place, but the fort is not strategically important in the sense with comparatively to the others, or historical events have not taken place much at the fort? And how did you funnel it down to the 12 fort list out of all the 600, if you can elaborate more?
Right. Yeah, that was a process that we went back and forth with our team, with Dr. Garge, with Dr. Mehendale. So that was difficult because, we have our list of attributes, 4, 5 that I showed. And definitely every fort that we select needs to have all those attributes. So that's why if one did not qualify, like there were cases like Purandar, why would we leave that? Or, Sinhgarh, looking at the historical aspect. And the most we struggled was between Khanderi and Kolaba. Like the sea forts, when we were looking at which was from the Maratha, strategy, which was more powerful or more significant, So, because both were used till the end, till the Peshwa period. So we had to really struggle with that, but that's where our historians and the team helped, and that's how we find it. So we have a complete process that would take another lecture, if we go through the process, because we go through the entire thing, why we are leaving this and why we are taking this. So that's how we did.
Yes, it was certainly like the most filtered kind of a task.
About the concrete, for concrete, everyone here is considering cement concrete. I want to ask if the lime concrete can also be used, because for the strength reason, many of them shift to cement concrete. Yes, you said rightly that the main problem is the corrosion of the reinforcement, but can be the lime concrete, because the initial strength of the lime concrete, though it is low, and Vikas sir rightly said that the quality control is a problem. But taking all this consideration, can lime concrete be used for the cantilevers, or maybe the balconies which he showed, or the shear wall which was done in lime concrete reinforcement?
Okay, I have to tell you something about lime concrete, reinforced lime concrete. Reinforced lime concrete was attempted at the beginning of the century in India. And there are multiple buildings up to 1930s where we see the use of reinforced lime concrete. Now, one has to understand how lime as a material, as lime concrete, and cement as a material functions. Now, cement in cement concrete has a process of what we refer to as providing a passivating layer. It cuts off oxygen and moisture flow to the reinforcement. So when you have reinforcement, we prescribe a cover for concrete, and the purpose of prescribing the cover is that you must have so much thickness of cement concrete because it provides a passivating layer, and the condition of the pH in the concrete, because of the presence of the hydration products of cement, does not allow moisture and air with dissolved carbon dioxide to reach the reinforcement. So cement concrete functions in a very different manner by cutting off moisture and oxygen to the reinforcement. The problem with lime concrete is, because of the nature of lime concrete, which is porous with interconnected pores, it allows moisture movement and air movement very, very easily. And therefore, all those constructions where lime concrete has been reinforced has had disastrous corrosion. And that is one of the reasons why 80 years down the line, 80% of Rashtrapati Bhavan's 1.5 kilometer long sunshades had to be completely replaced. So reinforced lime concrete is a divorceable combination of materials. Cement concrete with reinforcement is not. So I think that is an important aspect to be noted.
Thank you very much for this. I think this conference 2 days is still less time. I still feel that, when we have such expert, we should really have this knowledge pool and make most of it. I think it's very important to know where we want to use breathable materials and where we should not. So this was a very good opening site. Any other questions? Sir, do you want to say anything?
I actually failed to see this coming while designing this conference. There should have been a dedicated session on this question. Building materials, lime, concrete especially. I think we'll keep it for the next conference.
Thank you. There. Yes, Aniket. Yes, please. I'll take you after this. Just take the mic.
Okay. This is in continuation with what we have been discussing, and I would like to hear from all the panelists. Starting from, the question is related to post-conservation monitoring. I would like to know that what practices are being followed by ASI. Also, what is the importance of the monitoring in periodic reporting cycles for World Heritage Sites? I mean, where does it sit? How often we need to report? And also, if Architect Dilawri would like to share some of your experiences about monitoring the small sites. Usually, such facilities are available, like for examples like Rashtrapati Bhavan, where monitoring is more methodically done. But what individual professionals can do for this kind of monitoring? And if Dr. Menon would like to share some of the examples of technology and equipment for post-conservation monitoring. Yeah.
अच्छा जैसे कुछ एग्जांपल देंगे आप किस तरह के, चूँकि कंजर्वेशन तो हम कई तरह के कंजर्वेशन करते हैं.
Right, like for example, you talked about removal of some of the earlier interventions, or which were at that time, those were actually kind of conservation efforts, right? But then over the period, we realized that they don't work, or we need to kind of remove them, undo them. So the interventions that we are doing in present times, there should be a mechanism to even monitor that, so that we don't again come to the same point of removing it and causing more problems to the structure. So are there any practices in place by ASI?
कंजर्वेशन के तो एक ये भी मूल बात है ना कि जो भी हम करते हैं वो परमानेंट होता नहीं है, होना भी नहीं चाहिए, वो रिवर्सेबल होता है. हमेशा इस तरह का ही कंजर्वेशन की एक ये भी पॉलिसी होती है कि जब भी हम कोई ट्रीटमेंट करते हैं तो वो रिवर्सेबल होना चाहिए. तो वैसे तो कोई परमानेंट उसका ट्रीटमेंट नहीं होता है. और जिसका आप एग्जांपल दे रहे हैं वो एग्जांपल उनको इसलिए हटाया गया कि वो जो ओरिजिनल फैब्रिक है मोनूमेंट के, जैसे निज़ाम पीरियड में उन्होंने जो पिलर्स हैं, अब अजंता के जो पिलर्स हैं वो रॉक कट मोनोलिथिक पिलर्स हैं, उसके जगह निज़ाम पीरियड में जो पिलर क्रिएट किए गए वो ड्रेस्ड स्टोन के थे. तो दोनों में ही बहुत ही बड़ा अंतर था. तो उसको रिस्टोर करने के लिए हमने शुरुआत में आरसीसी के पिलर बनाए, और आज के डेट में जब भी पिलर हम कहीं रिस्टोर कर रहे हैं तो हम ओरिजिनल क्वेरी से ला करके स्टोन उसको बेंडिंग करके सेम एज इट इज जो है वैसे ही क्रिएट करते हैं। तो ये केस टू केस बेसिस पे इस तरह का काम करना होता है। और मॉनिटरिंग जो पोस्ट कंजर्वेशन मॉनिटरिंग है, नॉर्मली यही होता है कि अब भाई कंक्रीट जैसे हम यूज़ कर रहे हैं तो कंक्रीट की जो लाइफ है वो लाइफ हम एक्सपेक्ट करते हैं, लेकिन उसके पहले कहीं क्रैक्स आ रहे हैं या कुछ इस तरह की चीज़ें ऑब्जर्वेशन में आती हैं तो उसको हम ट्रीट करते हैं। तो कंजर्वेशन इज ए सॉर्ट ऑफ, मेरे हिसाब से एक ट्रीटमेंट है, और वो हमेशा हमको ओपन रखना ही चाहिए। कभी ये मान के नहीं चलना चाहिए कि दिस इज ए परमानेंट सॉल्यूशन, वो तो ओपन होना चाहिए हमेशा, ताकि जब भी ज़रूरत हो, हमसे ज़्यादा कोई अच्छी टेक्नोलॉजी आती है, अच्छा कोई मॉडिफिकेशन आता है तो हम उसको यूटिलाइज कर सकें। मेरे विचार से तो यही होना चाहिए।
Yeah, I mean, what you asked is more of a monitoring framework, I guess. I mean, this is what World Heritage usually requires, because when you're saying criteria, value, then they see, they want a complete list. Suppose it is, the lime work, or if it is the stone crafts, which is of outstanding value. So they want to see, column saying stone crafts, monitoring is done, whether it's weekly, monthly, annually, so that has to be specified by whom, which department, and which official. So, I mean, that is a monitoring indicator. And what is the indication that it's going bad? Is the stone color changing? Is it, flaking? So those need to be recorded. So the World Heritage actually requires, and ICOMOS wants, that kind of monitoring, calendar to be detailed by every site. And that is something which, probably in our practice, we really don't do that. And that is what they demand usually. So that's where the gap is. I don't think there is any World Heritage site in India where we do that level of monitoring. So, I mean, but maybe we need to see that what is the kind of monitoring that was indigenous to our, systems, and look at that. Because currently, I think we are in a phase where monitoring is not very good, whether it's as per the government or as per World Heritage, or even as what was practiced. Like if you have the traditional masons of earlier time, they would just look at the material and they would know, or, and so they would know what to watch, whether it's weekly, daily, monsoon time and all. So I think we need to establish the monitoring indicators, whether we do it in the local manner or what the World Heritage wants, but that is how they check the monitoring indicator.
I guess the first monitoring is required from the architect itself, because if that is done well, the next level of monitoring will reduce or will be as per the time period of the deterioration which will happen. Nowadays, what we are finding is that the kind of projects which are so large, and if you have an L1, the qualities are already compromised there. And I don't need to elaborate. If you give nuts, you're going to get monkeys. And the quality will never be maintained to that level which you're talking, and it will come back to same square one situation. Having said this, we have major problems that now it has become a contractor-driven kind of state of affairs, where he decides. You might write the best specification, and we've now diversified with the PMC coming in. So there's always who's trying to blame whom, who's maintaining more paperwork, but the quality is, as Shika rightly mentioned, the mason should know whether the lime is good or bad. But here you don't have a person, the person who's breaking is someone else, the person who's mixing is someone else, some ready mix comes, something just applies it as a paste. Whether it is cured, not cured, there's another person who's looking after that. So the whole system has gone for a change. That's the reason when we do smaller projects, we can maintain that quality. Big projects and larger projects, I don't know, I can't talk about it because I'm happy to do that small kind of things.
Mridula, thank you for this question. As architect Dilavari rightly said, first architect must know that, what the material is going in. So in my experience, as you mentioned, any one of us can answer to this. So in one of my project, what we did, it was of course a small and a private project. That's why we could do this. we took a little workshop where actual masons were working, and we got samples done on every item that we had considered. And then we involved the trust and the local people who were the part of the trust, and they had a faith in that project. So these people, we built a team. Building a team for monitoring is also one of the tasks, and we become kind of a mediator in between the working team, the contractors, the consultants, the owners, and even the stakeholders. So we built a team and then exactly knew whether the person is doing right or wrong, whether this, whether we need this kind of solutions for it, whether he is doing in a right way. So I think we are the ones who have entire right that, how the quality comes out, the supervision, and in a way in which the output should come. So that is something, if we train, people will get trained and they will know. So in this particular project, I was fortunate enough to build a team who did the monitoring for me, and I was informed like 3 times a day. It was a task for me, but then I took it in a way that they could understand, and they loved the whole process. And it was enjoyable for them and for me as well, because the people were involved. So monitoring became easy in that case. So I think we will take questions later or during the lunch. You can directly ask, because we are little less on time, and I think we must proceed for lunch because we have Honorable Minister coming in at 4 and we have another session to go. So there is so I'll hand over to Radhika. Thank you very much for your questions, and I thank all the panelists, dignitaries for their patient answering session.
I request Dr. Garge to felicitate our speakers and our moderator. Dr. Garge, please felicitate Dr. Shikha Jain. Architect Vikas Delavari. Dr. Shiv Bhagat. And architect Archana Deshmukh, ma'am. Thank you so much, everyone.